Hi, my name is Anthony. I work for Phoenix Art Care. I'm going to show you today how to make a 30 by 30 1.5-inch thick canvas, stretch canvas. This technique I use will work on any, doesn't have to be 1.5 inch thick, it doesn't have to be 30 by 30, it can be any size, any thickness. It does have to be wood stretcher bars, and the type of canvas I'm using is a cotton canvas. Cotton canvas will stretch different than a linen or a blended canvas, so keep that in mind when you are watching this video. You could get away with not using all these tools. You could use more tools, but this is typically what I would use to do a project like this. You'll need wood glue. I use a resin type wood glue specifically for framing. This is a brad nailer. This actually just shoots nails. They're called little brad nails. I use a 1-inch type brad nail. It's an 18 gauge, and that's going to hold a lot of the pieces together for the wood structure of the stretcher bar. Just a standard hammer. This is a little tiny square hammer. You can use a regular. I would recommend that you use one that has a flat head to it. You know, regardless, there are carpenter hammers that have spike heads. Don't use that. It just, they kind of destroys things and makes a mess. And all this you typically would use to, also known as an ice pick, you would use to remove nails. It's easy to get under the nail or the staples. If you need to remove them, this is the best and easy way. Do be careful, because if you dig too deep, you'll start to dig into the canvas and you'll start to make holes in your canvas, and you don't want that. Standard tape measure. This is the American version. We use inches, but you can use meters or centimeters. It doesn't matter, just whatever you need. Pencil. It's just easy to mark things up with a pencil. And then this is a stapler. This is a fabric stapler that upholstery people use. Canvas is kind of just like upholstery, so we use one of these to staple our canvas to the back of our stretcher bar. You can use a hand stapler. That works just as good. In my working here at Phoenix Art Care, I have to be very fast, and so I use pneumatic tools to get the jobs done. These are stretcher bar clamps, pliers. I think they call them canvas pliers. This is what we use to stretch the canvas. There are some that you can actually buy at Home Depot that I found. They do sell this, believe it or not, in the plumbing section. So if you ever go to the plumbing section, they might have a pair of these. It will not have the tab on it. That is kind of necessary to get that stretch really good. I haven't tried to use these without the tab, but I'm sure if you could not find these online and you needed to do something and you had it at Home Depot, you could find a welder. There's lots of them out there, or a handyman that can tack a little metal piece on the back of these, and they'll work just as good. We use a double miter saw to make our cuts on our stretcher bars. To create that perfect square stretcher bar. The key to stretching is you want it to be square, because you don't want to invest all this time into a painting, take it to a framer, and he can't frame it up because it's not square. So you want to make sure your canvas is square. So I use a double miter saw. You can use a chop saw, that works too. They're called miter chop saws. Just make sure you're measuring your 45s with a 45 tool. They have squares at Home Depot which work, but just make sure that 45 is perfectly square to the 45. So when you get that cut and you frame everything together, it comes together square. There is one other tool I use, and that's a straight edge. That's just simply to cut my canvas straight on a table. Most people won't have carpeted tables, so what you could use is just scissors. You'll probably use a straight edge, draw a line, and then cut it with scissors. There is a tool that I do use in the video. It's a little roller. You can actually use the back of a hammer. It's to smooth out the corners, you will see. but you can use the back of the hammer, just anything to apply an even pressure to kind of crimp those creases down on the canvas. So we use a lot of, this is called duck canvas. It's a cotton duck, and it's kind of some of it can be a blend of canvas or cotton, I should say, and linen. Linen has properties of lasting longer, and that's why they'll use linen a lot. The problem with linen is it doesn't stretch very well, and that's probably why they like the properties of linen, is because it will keep the paint kind of structurally where it is. It eliminates cracking and things like that, where cotton has some flexibility to it. So over time, it will expand and contract with different environments, which could pose problems with cracking. It is significantly cheaper, and that's why a lot of artists will use cotton as opposed to linen. It's also easier to come by. So it's just kind of the standard industry use is cotton. Just looking for straight sticks here. The stuff we use has what's called tongue and groove, and they alternate the crowns on the piece of wood so to get it to go straight. If you use just straight lumber, it will have a big curve in it from the grain. This is a double miter saw we use to cut 45-degree angles. It's set up on the 45-degree angle. You can't change the angle. We set it up perfect to the 32nds of an inch. And this is what we call a V-nailer. It shoots underpins from underneath the wood to hold the corners together. And I will sample you one right now. Just like that. A little V-nail comes out. I don't know if you could see that. Maybe put it on one of these guys.
Technically, you can always go harder. But when it reaches a certain point, it can trade off with your physical capacity. And you can go so hard to yourself, and then it ends up overall breaking up. And so where do you know you need to go harder, or where you need to be like too tight?
This is a special resin glue, Framer's resin glue. It's kind of like wood glue, a little bit more flexible and a lot harder in holding together. And then even though wood is, or the saw cuts straight angles, wood isn't straight, so I gotta make sure that my frame is square by checking the corners and getting the same measurement. That will determine whether it's square or not. And I could just pull a little bit on one side, and that will change the square dimension until we get perfect squareness. And with that, I go to my nail gun and make sure it stays that way. Now we're just going to measure out how much canvas we need. I got my special straight edges. These are actually just blank steels you can buy at Home Depot or Ace Hardware, but they work really good for cutting canvas, cutting fabric, anything like that. And they're really cheap to buy. Everybody has their own kind of stretching technique, but generally it's all to serve the same purpose of getting the front of the canvas tight and wrinkle free. This is just a technique I've perfected over the 15 years I've been doing it, and I find it works the best for not having any problems in the future. I know in the beginning when I first started stretching, I would have a lot of canvas that would come back and I would have to re-stretch it because it would form, I guess what you would call bubbles on the edges. And that's just from pulling the canvas unevenly across the bars. Okay, I got my canvas cut. I'm going to cut supports now for the middle. I used to do corner supports, which would be 45-degree angles. I no longer do that anymore. I only do that to square up big pieces. From now on, we do middle supports on both sides, and that eliminates future problems that I've had before in the past. So this is an 1.5-inch stretcher bar. That's the when they talking in our industry, that's the whenever they say 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 3/4, it's the depth at which is what they're talking about, not the width, which doesn't matter because you can't see that from the front. So always remember it's the depth. This is 1.5 inches, and typically I go about 3 inches. It is specific on the bars. I do have some bars that are thicker, so I'll tend to go a little bit wider with my canvas, and that's so that I can get leverage with these stretchers that I use to actually stretch the canvas. My technique involves actually using the corner of the stretcher bar to pull the canvas tight. And so if I have different thickness stretcher bars, which I'll show you right here, this is a 1-inch thick, but it's very wide. And so I would typically go a little bit wider so that I can use that lip still in order to pull the canvas tight. And the only reason I do that, you can pull your canvas tight, is simply from pulling upwards. But like I said, it's a technique that I've used that makes it easier, quicker. You know, in my job here is to make stretcher bars and stretch canvas as quickly as I can and still maintain the quality. So we don't mind using up more material in order to accomplish that goal. Support, I typically do anything bigger than 24 inches on the length. I'll add a middle support. So let's say I had a 24 by 48 inch piece, that's when I'd add support. Now if I had a 20 by 40, I'll only add a middle bar. And that's going to depend on the material you're using, the thickness. Like this stuff right here, this is our heavy duty bar. And so I use this for really big pieces. And this gives me a lot of deflection strength, so I can go a lot longer without actually having to add a support. I think on this stuff I can go up to 40 inches without actually having to add support. So all these measurements I'm taking are all measurements I use to find the center. Because I'm also going to be cutting bars this way and splicing them into this, I only want to make one cut that's equally the same. So I figured out based off of my stretcher bars what I need to measure at in order to get an approximation of where I should put the edge of my supports. And the supports we're using here are just other stretcher bar that we have around. That works perfect. I like to use lots of glue when you're making stretch bars. The glue is really what holds everything together. We will be shooting these in with nails. The nails will just kind of keep it there while we stretch it and give the time for glue to dry. At first I used to use 3/4 inch length brads. I've kind of upgraded to 1 inch type of brads, which are a little bit longer. I'm finding that the 1 inch actually gives me a lot more support in keeping the bars straight and in there. You want to keep your fingers away. The nails have been known to, they'll come out depending on the grain. There's hard grain, there's knots. So you don't want to put your fingers anywhere close to where, you know, that nail can come out and hit you in the fingers. Now we're finding the centers of our other sides. Don't be afraid to use lots and lots of glue. It's better to use more than it is to use less. That was a good example to show you the unpredictability of these brad nails because they're coming out so fast. It actually banked off of this hard knot that's going right here. I don't know if you can see that, but it didn't allow it to penetrate the wood. That could have ricocheted off into the distance, so you want to keep in mind your surroundings, your areas, wear safety goggles at all times when you're using pneumatic tools. Now what I was doing there is I was pushing against this rail and pulling this at the same time. I'd like to take my measurements from the corners of my frames. You see me doing that earlier, you'll see me doing that all the time. Because what happens is these sticks, they'll have a bow in it, either going out or they'll have a bow going in, right? And so if you take your measurement with that bow, it's going to give you the wrong dimension. You're going to solidify the mistake in that piece of wood. So if you bring your measurements out to here, you know that that's the correct dimension you want, and you want to reflect that dimension on the inside. So you make your cuts at that dimension, and then you'll either have to, in this case, I had to bring that bow in, and so I pulled on the stretcher bar and pushed on this to try to correct that bow and then nail it in, and those nails will hold that until the glue sticks. Sometimes, depending on what type of wood, you'll have to add more nails. Typically 3 nails is what I usually have to deal with. Now we'll get to stretching. This is they actually use this stapler for fabric. A lot of fabric companies will use this and for making couches, things like that. Senco, I love it. We've always used it here. Shoots really fast, accurate, and I've had no problems with it. Very expensive. You can use any stapler. You can actually just use a hand stapler if you don't have pneumatic tools. Okay, so right now what I'm doing is I'm evening out my canvas, making sure it's all even so that when I make my first two staples, I don't have to shift anything around. That's when you start to get really weird bubbles in your canvas, is when you start to staple and you don't realize that this corner is like this and you're trying to pull this corner over here. It will just start making your life a mess. So always start off on a good footing. Make sure everything's straight. Make all your corners straight. And then you can start. Always start with the middles first. So I'm gonna go opposite sides, straightening this out. Make sure that's straight. Now, the hardest thing to explain is how tight do you stretch a canvas. For me, it's, because I've been doing it for so long, it's a feeling for me. I can see, you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, you can see the ripples. What I'm looking for is two fairly tight ripples, and that's how I know visually. And then this also moves probably on a size stretch this big. It should move around 3/8 of an inch when I'm pulling it. Again, what I'm looking for now, I'm changing my two lines that I will see will go laterally towards the other corners. And I'll have the same thing on this, and that's kind of a visual indication along with the pull indication of about 3/8 of an inch. And then you see I got this diamond that's going on, right? Okay, and then from the middles, I'm gonna go to my corners now. This isn't something that I always did the whole career of my stretching canvas, and this is where I came into problems. Before I started doing corners, I would just simply start working my way from the middle and going on out. And I'd do this side, and then I'd do the opposite side. The problem is that once you get to this side, when you pull on this, because these are all stapled in, it will actually create these little things that we've shown you. It will create miniature versions of that along the sides, right? So to eliminate that, we actually are going to pull all this canvas tight towards the corners on each corners so that we don't have that issue once we go to do our last pull on the last side. So what I'm doing here is I'm pulling this side, so I'm trying to get this line tight right here, and I'm going to hold that with my hand. In my other hand, I'm going to pull this side. So now I got both of them tight. I can let go of this hand now because this is actually holding the tightness for both sides now. As long as you don't shift your hand, you stay solid right here, you can put in your first nails or your first staples. And then as you retighten this, you should have no problems. If you don't do that little technique of holding the side while you're pulling the other side, you'll create a little bubble in the corner of the canvas on the face. Super easy to fix, and I'll show you how to fix that. It's no big deal, but it just requires more work for you to do. Okay, and now we're prepped to finish the stretching. This is another new technique that I've introduced into my routine, and that's actually doing the middles again. So from here, it's kind of an evolution of trying to perfect the stretching. From here, what I used to do is just start in the middle again, work my way to the ends, which worked fine, but I find I get a more accurate and more tighter stretch if I work my middles again. So what I mean by middles is I'm going to go the middle between these two now. Just like that. I'm going to do the opposite side. You always work opposite. Don't work in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion. That's only effective for the corners. Do the opposite side. There. And from there, we've pretty much gotten the tightness we want, and now it's just a matter of finishing the rest of the stretch, which should go really fast now. I'm going to do the opposite side of what I just did. And the amount of tightness I'm pulling, if you can see here, you can kind of see how it's a little bit loose and baggy there. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to even it out with this. So as you can see, when I pull it tight, you can see it's kind of even. You can kind of see the pattern in the grain, and you can kind of see it even out. Sometimes the wood can be a little bit hard and your nails won't go down as much. Just simply hammer them in with a hammer. No big deal. Now we come to the trickiest part, and that's folding your corners. We like to fold corners around here. Some people will just cut the corner. You know, it's your preference, but I like the look of a folded corner. Okay. So we're going to pull this out just to open this corner up. We're going to fold it flat, okay? We're going to create this, you know, I don't have any analogies. I haven't thought about teaching this, so you just get to visually see it. That's it. And you can adjust it a little bit like that. Do another one the opposite way. Okay. Very nice. I like to press these corners down, which make them a little finishing touch. Got my little roller thing here. We just put some pressure on it. And that creates a nice little sharp. You see it from the front, how it would look, you know. You can hardly tell it's there. Also doesn't compromise the canvas in any way. You're able to restretch it in the future if you need to. There we go. So let's say you are struggling with the corners on that technique I showed you of holding one end and doing the other end, and you got a bubble. Let's just say you have a bubble in this corner. It's a little saggy or whatnot. All you simply do, I use an awl, is you'll just remove the staples from, you know, about 3 inches out where the end of that bubble is. You'll just remove these staples, and you could do this for any kind of bubble that's occurring in it. You just want to go beyond the bubble a little bit. Be careful when you're using one of these. I've stabbed myself plenty of times. If you keep your hands out of the way, you won't have that issue. Okay, I'm going to take one more out on this side, just to kind of even the other side. Okay, so we have our canvas is loose now. So we have, like, let's just say it was a loose spot. It looked something like that, you know, before you started, and you wanted to fix it. This is how we would fix that. So there, we simply work our way back to the corners, okay? Pull it tight. Same on this side. Okay, and then refold our corner. And then your canvas would be fixed. Tight again. Thank you for watching the video. I hope this was an informative video. We actually do prints, we do shipping, we do framing, we stretch canvas. We're here to help artists, and I hope this video really helps.